I wasn't supposed to hear it. Dad forgot to end the call, and suddenly his voice filled my room cold, calm, terrifying. That old man won't last a day after our Thanksgiving surprise. Then Mom's laughter followed. The mansion will be ours by Christmas. My heart stopped. They were talking about Grandpa Henry, my billionaire grandfather. For a moment I thought it was a cruel joke. But then Dad's voice dropped lower. Make sure the wine is ready. That's when I knew it wasn't a joke. It was a plan. I ended the call, shaking, and dialed another number. Grandpa, it's me. Please don't come to dinner. He paused, then said quietly, Don't worry, sweetheart. I'll be there, and I won't be alone. 5 days later, when he walked into our dining room, my parents froze and their faces turned pale. From the outside, we looked perfect. The Carter family, elegant, wealthy, unshakable. Dad managed one of Grandpa's real estate branches. Mom hosted charity events and smiled in every photo. And me, I was the quiet one, the daughter who believed we were lucky. After Grandma died last year, Grandpa Henry became quieter, more withdrawn. Dad said, He's old, Emily, he needs us. We'll make this year special for him. So when he suggested inviting Grandpa to Thanksgiving dinner, I thought it was sweet. Now I see it for what it was. The week before the holiday, our mansion in Portland turned into a stage set. Mom barked orders at the housekeeper. No dust, no smudges. Henry Carter notices everything. Dad obsessed over the menu and wine. He loves his Cabernet. Make sure it's aged perfectly. Everything had to look flawless. The illusion of love hiding the rot beneath. I watched them rehearse kindness. Mom practiced her gentle laugh in the mirror. Dad rehearsed his charming lines. Henry, you've lost weight. You look 20 years younger. It was sickening. One night, as they discussed seating arrangements, I asked carefully, Dad, why are you so nervous? He's just family. He smiled too quickly, because family deserves our best. But when I walked past his office later, I caught a glimpse of his computer screen, a document titled, Property Title Transfer Draft. My chest tightened. I tried to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe legal work, maybe old files. But every time I heard them whisper, every time Mom mentioned new beginnings, I felt the floor under me cracking. By Tuesday night, Mom said, when Grandpa arrives, you'll pour the first glass of wine for him. You're his favorite. He'll never suspect a thing. I smiled weakly, pretending I didn't understand. But inside, I was screaming. When I lay in bed that night staring at the ceiling, I realized I couldn't keep pretending anymore. I'd already called Grandpa once, warned him, but now I needed to trust that he meant what he said, that he'd be ready. And yet a part of me still hoped I'd be wrong, that maybe, just maybe, my parents weren't as monstrous as I feared. I stared at my phone for almost an hour before I found the courage to call him. My hands were trembling so badly, I almost dropped it. When Grandpa Henry answered, his voice was calm, too calm. Emily, sweetheart, it's late. What's wrong, Grandpa? My throat tightened. Please don't come to Thanksgiving dinner. There was silence, long, heavy, why not? I took a shaky breath and whispered the words that had haunted me for days. Dad and Mom, they're planning something. Something terrible. I overheard them. He didn't interrupt. He didn't even sound surprised. Tell me exactly what you heard. So I did, every word. That old man won't last a day after our Thanksgiving surprise. The mansion will be ours. When I finished, my heart was pounding so hard I thought I'd faint. Another pause, then softly, You did the right thing, Emily. I'm proud of you. You believe me. I whispered, of course. I've seen the way they look at me lately. Greed has a way of showing itself. That broke me. Tears streamed down my face, part fear, part relief. Please, Grandpa, go somewhere safe. Don't come here. No, he said firmly. If I run, they win. I'll come, but not alone. Not alone. Don't worry about it. Just act normal. Let them think you know nothing. Before I could ask more, he hung up. The next morning, Mom's tearfulness made my stomach turn. "Your grandfather confirmed he's coming. Isn't that wonderful?" Her smile was sugar-coated poison. Dad kissed her cheek, murmuring, "Good. Everything's going according to plan." They didn't notice me standing in the doorway, frozen. That night, I lay awake, listening to the rain against my window. Every thunderclap sounded like a countdown. I replayed Grandpa's last words over and over. "I'll come, but not alone." Who would he bring? A friend, his lawyer, security, and most importantly, would it be enough? Because something in Dad's tone told me that whatever surprise they had prepared, it wasn't just poison in a glass. It was years of resentment finally boiling over, and in 5 days it would explode right at our dining table. Thanksgiving morning arrived, but the air in our house felt heavy, poisoned. Mom was humming in the kitchen, a cheerful tune that didn't match the darkness in her eyes. "Emily, set the dining table, dear. Everything must be perfect when your grandfather arrives." Her voice was bright, almost glowing like a spotlight on a crime scene. Dad paced near the fireplace, checking his watch every few minutes. "He's never late," he muttered. "Henry's too proud to keep anyone waiting." Every word dripped with something sharp expectation. Fear I couldn't tell anymore. The caterers came around noon. The smell of roasted turkey, cinnamon, and butter filled the house. Normally, that scent meant warmth and family. Today, it just made my stomach twist. Mom floated around the kitchen like a performer rehearsing her final act. "Wine glasses aligned," she said, adjusting one by millimeters. "Candles lit right before he arrives." And Emily remembered a smile. I wanted to scream smile while they planned to kill him. Around 4:30, I slipped into my room to text Grandpa. "Are you still coming? Please tell me you're safe." No reply. Minutes turned into an hour. Outside, the sun began to set, casting long orange streaks across the mansion's marble floors. Dad stood by the window staring at the driveway. "He's late," he said, jaw tightening. "He's making us wait." Mom replied coldly. He always liked to control the room. Then at exactly 6:00 p.m., headlights appeared through the front gate. Mom straightened her pearl necklace. "Showtime," she whispered. The doorbell rang. Dad opened it and froze. Grandpa Henry stood there, tall as ever in his dark overcoat. His silver hair gleamed under the porch light, but he wasn't alone. 2 people stepped in behind him, a woman in a navy suit and a man with an earpiece. "Richard, Elaine," Grandpa said smoothly. "This is Miss Holloway, my estate attorney, and Mr. Rhodes, my head of security." Mom blinked. "Security for Thanksgiving dinner?" "Oh, just a precaution," Grandpa replied with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "After all, can't be too careful with family these days." Words sliced through the room. Dad forced a laugh. "You're joking, right?" "I rarely joke about my will," Grandpa said. He stepped past them into the living room, scanning everything. The table, glasses, even the wine bottle waiting beside the decanter. Then his eyes met mine. He gave a slight nod, almost invisible, but enough to make my heart settle for the first time in days. Dinner was about to begin, but this wasn't a family gathering anymore. It was a battlefield disguised with linen napkins and candlelight. We sat at the table like actors trapped in a scene we couldn't escape. The golden light from the chandelier shimmered against the crystal glasses, making everything look perfect, too perfect. Even the air felt rehearsed. Grandpa sat at the head of the table, calm, almost regal. Mom and Dad sat across from him, faces stretched into polite smiles. I sat between them, the only one who knew the truth on both sides. So Grandpa began, carving the turkey slowly. Deliberately. "Richard, I heard the Portland office is still struggling. Is that true?" Dad stiffened his fork halfway to his mouth. "We're handling it. These things take time." "Ah," Grandpa murmured. 30 years of my work and still no progress. Curious. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the ticking of the clock felt loud. Mom cleared her throat. "Henry, maybe we should just enjoy dinner." "No." business talk tonight. Of course, Grandpa said, smiling faintly. You're right, Elaine. Let's talk about family instead. He turned his gaze on me. Emily, my dear, why don't you pour the wine? You've grown so much. I'd like to see how steady your hands are. My heart nearly stopped. I reached for the bottle, my fingers trembling slightly. The ruby red liquid flowed smoothly into each glass. When I got to Grandpa's, he lifted a hand. Allow me, he said softly. He took the bottle from me, poured his own, then almost too casually switched his glass with Dad's. No one else seemed to notice, but I did, and so did Grandpa's attorney, Miss Holloway, whose eyes flicked up just once, as if confirming something. We ate in silence for a few minutes. Then Grandpa set his fork down, his tone deceptively calm. You know, Richard, when your mother was alive, she used to say, Thanksgiving was about gratitude, about appreciating what we have, not taking what isn't ours. Dad's smile faltered. We appreciate everything you've given us, he said. Don't we, Elaine? Of course, Mom said quickly, her voice too high, too fast. Good, Grandpa replied, because I've been thinking a lot about legacy, about who deserves to carry it forward. He looked straight at me. Emily has integrity. She doesn't lie. She doesn't steal. The air cracked. Dad's hand tightened around his knife. What exactly are you implying? Grandpa leaned back, utterly composed. I'm not implying anything, Richard. I'm simply reminding you that greed has consequences. Then he raised his glass. To family, he said. Dad hesitated, but lifted his own glass, the one Grandpa had switched. He drank deeply. For a split second, everything was still. Then color drained from his face. What did you do? Grandpa smiled faintly. Nothing serious, just a little taste of what trust feels like when it's poisoned. Dad's hand shook as he clutched the edge of the table. His face turned ghostly white. What did you put in my glass? Grandpa leaned forward slightly, voice cold and deliberate. Relax, Richard. It's not poison, just a mild sedative. You'll be fine in a few minutes. But at least now you know how it feels to be powerless. Mom shot to her feet. Henry, how dare you? This is insane. Is it? Grandpa's gaze cut through her. Or is it justice? Her voice trembled. You can't prove anything. You can't actually, he interrupted smoothly, nodding toward the end of the table. I can, Mr. Rhodes. The man in the black suit tapped his tablet. A video began to play on the massive dining room TV behind us. The audio filled the room, unmistakable voices. Dad, that old man won't last a day after our Thanksgiving surprise. Mom, the mansion will be ours. The sound of their laughter echoed through the dining room. Mom's face drained of color. Dad sat frozen, eyes wide, lips trembling. Where did you get that? He whispered. Your phones. Grandpa said coolly, I didn't bug them. You forgot to hang up. Emily heard everything. She called me right after. Both their heads snapped toward me. You told him, Mom hissed. I saved his life. I shot back. Someone had to. Dad slammed his fist against the table. You stupid girl. You've ruined everything. No, Grandpa said, standing. You ruined yourselves. Miss Holloway opened a leather folder and began laying out papers on the table. Her tone was crisp and unshakable. As of this morning, Mr. Henry Carter has transferred full ownership of the Carter Mansion and related properties into a charitable foundation. The Carter Trust under Emily Carter's management. Mom gasped. What? You gave it to her, not gave. Grandpa corrected, entrusted. I built this family on integrity, not greed. Dad's breathing grew ragged. You can't just erase us from everything. We're your blood. Blood means nothing without honor, Grandpa said, his voice rising for the first time. You wanted to kill me for money, Richard. Your own father. You drove me to it, Dad shouted, slamming his chair back. You always controlled everything, the business, the will, my life, and you threw it all away. Grandpa's voice thundered across the table. You think this mansion defines power. You think stealing it would make you more than the weak, frightened boy who always blamed others. Mom covered her ears, trembling. "Stop it, both of you." But Grandpa didn't stop. "You wanted my empire. Fine, take it, but you'll live with what you've done. Every paper, every recording, every witness. It's all ready to hand to the authorities." Tears welled in my eyes. I'd never seen him like this. Fierce, unstoppable, righteous. "Grandpa, please," I whispered. He turned to me, his expression softening. "Don't cry, Emily. This isn't vengeance, it's truth." He faced my parents again. "You plan to end my life for this mansion. Tonight, I end your claim to it. You have nothing here now. Not the property, not my trust, not my respect." Dad's voice broke into a plea. "Henry, please, we can fix this." "You already did," Grandpa said, stepping back, "by showing me who you really are." Silence. Just the faint crackle of candles burning low. Mr. Rhodes took a quiet step forward. "Mr. Carter, shall I escort them out?" "Yes," Grandpa said. "They no longer belong in this house." Mom collapsed into tears as the guards guided her toward the door. Dad followed, defeated, staring back at me one last time. I met his gaze, and for the first time I felt no fear, only relief. The front door closed behind them with a hollow, echoing click. Grandpa sank back into his chair, exhausted but calm. "Justice," he murmured, staring into his untouched wine. "That's the real Thanksgiving gift." I reached across the table, took his hand, and whispered, "You didn't just save your life tonight, Grandpa. You saved mine, too." The dining room was silent after the door slammed shut. Only the faint clink of the chandelier swaying above us broke the stillness. My parents, my own flesh and blood, had just been escorted out of the mansion like criminals. For a long time no one spoke. Grandpa sat still, his fingers lightly touching the tablecloth where their glasses had been. Finally he exhaled. "I never thought I'd have to do that," he said quietly. "Not to my own son." I swallowed hard, my voice trembling. "You did what you had to do." "No," he said, shaking his head slowly. "I did what he made me do. We heard muffled shouting outside." I moved toward the window. In the driveway, Dad and Mom were arguing, faces twisted with rage and shame. Their voices echoed off the stone walls. "You promised it would work." Mom screamed, "You're the one who wanted this." Dad snapped back. "It was your idea to poison him. You agreed. Don't you dare pin this on me." They were tearing each other apart. The perfect couple unraveling under the weight of their own greed. I pressed my hand to my mouth, my heart breaking and burning at the same time. "They're destroying themselves," I whispered. Grandpa joined me at the window, his reflection beside mine in the glass. "Evil never stays united, Emily," he said softly. "It always turns on itself." A flash of red and blue lights pierced the darkness. 2 police cars pulled up by the gate. "I called them earlier," Grandpa said calmly, "before dinner, just in case." Within minutes, the officers were at the door. One of them, tall, steady, stepped inside. "Mr. Carter, we received your report." "Are these the individuals you mentioned?" Grandpa nodded toward the driveway. "Yes, that's my son and his wife. They tried to harm me. You'll find evidence inside." The officers left to speak with them. I watched as my mother's expression morphed from anger to terror when they opened her purse and found the small glass vial, the same powder she had meant for Grandpa's wine. "Ella Carter, Richard Carter," one officer said, voice firm, "you are under arrest for attempted assault and conspiracy to commit harm." Mom's scream ripped through the cold air as they cuffed her. Dad didn't resist. He just stood there hollow-eyed, whispering, "Emily, please tell them." I shook my head slowly, tears spilling down my cheeks. "I can't save you from yourselves." As they were led away, the wind carried her voice back to me. "You ruined this family, Emily. No, I thought you did." When the police cars disappeared down the long driveway, silence returned, the kind that feels heavier than sound. Grandpa put a gentle hand on my shoulder. "You were brave," he said, "braver than I could have asked for." "It doesn't feel like bravery," I whispered. "It feels like losing everything sometimes," he replied. "You have to lose what's rotten to save what's worth keeping." The candles flickered out one by one, and in that fading light, I realized Thanksgiving wasn't about gratitude anymore. It was about survival. The next morning, sunlight crept into the mansion like it was afraid to enter. Everything was still: the chairs, the plates, the untouched turkey, frozen reminders of what had happened. I walked downstairs to find Grandpa sitting by the fireplace, his reading glasses on, flipping through documents. His expression was calm, but his hands trembled slightly. "Did you sleep?" I asked. He looked up and smiled faintly. I closed my eyes, but my mind didn't rest. Mine neither. The silence between us wasn't empty. It was full of everything we didn't need to say. By noon, the phone began ringing non-stop. Neighbors, journalists, even board members from Grandpa's company. "Billionaire Henry Carter survives alleged poisoning attempt by family." The headlines read. I turned the TV off. He didn't need to see that. Later that afternoon, a detective stopped by with an update. "Mr. Carter," he said, "we've charged both suspects. There's enough evidence for attempted homicide and conspiracy." The video and the powder samples were decisive. I watched Grandpa nod solemnly, like a man accepting both justice and heartbreak at once. "And the daughter?" the detective asked gently. Grandpa smiled softly at me. "She's not a suspect," he said. "She's the reason I'm still alive." When the detective left, I finally broke down. "I don't know how to feel," I whispered. "They're my parents, Grandpa, but they tried to kill you," he sighed, closing the folder on his lap. "Sometimes the truth feels cruel, but it's still the truth, and it sets us free even when it hurts." Days passed. Reporters camped outside our gates, hungry for scandal, but Grandpa refused all interviews. "Justice doesn't need an audience," he told me. "It just needs peace." Meanwhile, Mom and Dad's lawyers reached out for plea negotiations. The prosecutors offered a deal. Lesser charges in exchange for full confession. Grandpa agreed. "Not because I pity them," he said, "but because I want this to end without hatred." It is a purity of the Mater face. When the verdict came 2 weeks later, it felt surreal. 3 years probation, 200 hours of community service at a senior care home. They were forbidden from contacting Grandpa or me for 5 years. The tabloids called it lenient, but I knew better. It wasn't mercy. It was consequence, poetic and quiet. That night, Grandpa poured us both tea instead of wine. "To truth," he said, raising his cup. "And to peace," I added. As the fire crackled beside us, I realized something. Justice isn't loud. It doesn't always punish. Sometimes it simply restores balance and lets you breathe again. A month later, the mansion felt different. Quieter, lighter, like it had finally exhaled after years of holding its breath. Winter had settled over Portland. The gardens were draped in frost, the fountains frozen in mid-splash. Inside, Grandpa and I decorated the Christmas tree, something Grandma used to do before she passed. "Silver or gold?" I asked, holding 2 ribbons. "Silver," Grandpa said. "Gold feels like the past." He smiled faintly as he placed the last ornament, a small photo of Grandma in her wedding dress. We stood back and admired the lights twinkling across the branches. For once, the silence between us wasn't painful. It was peace. After a while, Grandpa handed me a small velvet box. "What's this?" I asked. "Open it." Inside was a single old-fashioned key attached to a brass tag that read, "The Carter Foundation. It's yours now," he said quietly. "The trust we created, the one that owns this mansion and funds scholarships. I want you to run it." "Me?" I gasped. "But I'm not ready." "You are," he said, eyes soft but firm. "You saw evil and chose good. You stood for truth when it cost you everything. That's what leadership means." Tears blurred my vision. I threw my arms around him, and for a moment I felt like a child again. Safe, loved, whole. Outside, snow began to fall, covering the world in white. For the first time in months, I didn't feel haunted by what had happened. I felt grateful not for what I lost, but for what survived. Family isn't just blood. It's who stands beside you when the world falls apart. And that night, as the fire burned low and Grandpa dozed in his chair, I whispered a silent promise. I would honor his legacy, not with wealth, but with truth. And when the world looked at the Carter name again, they wouldn't see betrayal. They'd see redemption.